All right. So I wonder where we left it last week. I don't know. We were talking about what? We're talking how to deal with uncertainty. Well, you know, I mean, yeah, there's 27 different doorways into this. We know that. Buddhist view, this world view, this vast world view. What's that term in science? I always forget. They're looking for a view that explains everything. What is it? The view? What's it called?
Oh, the theory of everything.
Theory of everything. Well, listen, people. This is not being arrogant, but Buddhism is a theory of everything. You don't have to like it. You don't have to even want to think about it, but that's what it is. It's completely coherent, totally coherent, vast view of the universe. What it is, where it comes from, who we are, what the purpose of life is, how to get happy and how to stop suffering, and how to get in touch with reality. That's not a joke to say that. I mean, scientists might think we're completely insane, these poor demented Buddhists, you know, but that's literally what it is. And you know, so, and to remember, what's the point of all this? Big picture, okay? What's the point? Well, you know, it's expressed perfectly. I'm sure I said it every week. I say it every week now, all the time. But what's the point of all this? The big picture, the long-term result. This is almost so simple, it's embarrassing. But it really tells us exactly what the job of being a Buddhist is. Whether you're a 1% Buddhist or a 100% Buddhist, it's the same job. And it's expressed in the word Buddha. The etymology of this word is extremely delicious. And the Tibetan word, the Tibetan equivalent is the same, Sangye, Buddha. Well, you know, Sang, Bud, implies the utter eradication from our mind, our consciousness, our very being, of all neuroses, all fear, all nonsense, all ego grasping, all the nonsense, the stuff that we are intimately familiar with, the stuff that we so take for granted as normal that we would think we'd, in our world, in our neuroscientific view of the universe and our view of the universe psychologically speaking, to hear that what Buddha's saying is that you can get rid of this stuff. This is like mental illness. It's like weird for the world, but this is exactly what Buddha's saying. We can get rid of all the rubbish. It's not at the core of our being. It's adventitious. It is not intrinsic. It is not integral to who we are. This is an incredibly outrageous point, and this is unique to the Buddha's view of the mind. This is utterly unique. This is Buddhist psychology. It's outrageous. Not only can we do that, we get the second syllable, da, gye, implies we can develop literally, to perfection, all the other stuff in our mind that we are also familiar with. Love, wisdom, compassion, kindness, generosity, forgiveness, intelligence, self-confidence, you name it. So we know these words. We're intimately familiar with all the words I've just said. Love, hate, depression, anxiety, psychosis, mental illness, you name it. Compassion, generosity, we know all these words. This is the substance of Buddhist psychology. I mean, the West, we make it so complicated. There must be volumes of psychiatric, you know, illnesses, and every day we're discovering new ones. Buddha hasn't changed his view in 2,000 years, 2,500 years, you know. It's not a joke. It's almost deceptively simple. You know, it always seems simplistic. I mean, you don't go to the therapist, oh, I got angry today. Well, shut up, Robina, and wait till you want to kill somebody. Come back to me then. No, not like that for the Buddha. So, if this is the result of this hard work, it tells us the job. It tells us, it implies the methodology. So it's almost so simple. So what's the job? The bottom line of being a Buddhist, again, whether you're 1% or 100%, it's the same job. The bottom line, the essence, the heart job is distinguishing between the neuroses and the other stuff. That's it. If you can get rid of one lot and grow the other, if you can get rid of all the weeds and grow all the flowers in your garden, you had better learn botany, hadn't you? And what's your main job? To distinguish between the weeds and the flowers. That's it. Pull out the boring old weeds and grow the flowers. That's it. That's the bottom line. It's not a joke, you know, but it's kind of encouraging that it's that simple. But it's the hardest job we'll ever do. So it's because the concept is simple doesn't mean the job is simple. But don't lose track, don't lose sight of the actual job. And that's what we tend to do. But it's not an easy job, because that's not a job we do in our culture. We don't have that level of knowledge about our mind. And that's not insulting neuroscientists, not insulting, you know, psychologists and psychiatrists. But we know, I mean, we know in terms of our views in this world, psychology is kind of the lowest on the totem pole, because it's all about subjective, and we don't trust subjective. But it's the exact opposite for the Buddha. The exact opposite, you know. These genius Indians, well before the Buddha, they're the ones who mapped the mind. They mapped the mind, not the brain. I remember the Dalai Lama so kindly gave $750,000 sometime to some bunch of neuroscientists to help them map the mind. I mean, how humble and kind of him. He's mapped it a long time ago. He doesn't need the map of the mind, but he's been encouraging, because he's trying to bring the Buddhist views, which is so abstract to us in the West, to bring it into this world so people can begin to listen to it by his listening to our views. He's so amazing, the Dalai Lama. These incredible conferences the last 30, 40 years, mainly organized by an organization called Mind and Life. You'll see their website, mindandlife.org. They're amazing conferences the last 30, 40 years with the best brains in the West, between His Holiness and his mob, and the best brains in the West. And there's incredible findings coming out of this. It's just so encouraging. And I've met so many, we did a conference a bit like Tony Steele does in Sydney, those happiness conferences. We did one in San Francisco 12 years ago. I remember we had people from all the big universities in America, and every one of those people had been moved and touched by working with His Holiness. It was extraordinary to hear them, It's amazing. It's amazing. And of course, it's encouraging to hear, neuroscientists now proving very kindly, very gently, politely proving what Buddha's been telling us for 2,500 years, very quietly. The difference is they're looking at it from the external point of view. The Buddhism looks from the internal point of view. So the job of working on your mind and getting rid of the rubbish and growing the goodness, it sounds almost insanely simple, and it is. But to do it, why is it so hard? And this is what's so important. Why is it so hard? Well, let's take this view of, what's it called again? A view of what? What's it called?
Theory of everything.
The theory of everything. Let's take Buddha's theory of everything and look at it. There's two approaches that we need to use if we're trying to do even just the wisdom wing, so that we can be qualified to do the compassion wing. And the wisdom wing is what we do on ourselves, the work we do, the nuts and bolts of Buddhist psychology and metaphysics and philosophy that we utilize and internalize in order to develop our own potential. And then we know how to help others, So the two main things here, and this is the first stages of practice, the wisdom wing has to come first. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, compassion is the point, but it's not enough. You've got to have wisdom. So if compassion is the university level, and if you take this lam-rim packaging, if some of you might be familiar with this Tibetan packaging of all the Buddha's teachings, I like to call it junior school, high school, university, and postgraduate. It's perfect. We get it. So junior school and high school is the wisdom wing, and you've got to go there first before you get anywhere near compassion wing, which is university level. And that's a big surprise to us. So I forget whatever we said last time, but let's just look into the wisdom wing, look into these nuts and bolts, again, reminding us of how and why it's so hard to do this job, but then also how that qualifies us to be of benefit to others. It qualifies us for the compassion wing. In fact, the level of compassion the Buddha says we're capable of achieving is impossible without the wisdom wing. When we understand that, when we understand this gradual, we hear it means, this lam-rim means gradual path. It sounds very cute, but we don't kind of get it, As much as we might have heard that all these years as Buddhists, it's a gradual path. But the moment you hear that, okay, before that, but as soon as we, Lama Zopa, the way he's respectfully respecting the lineage, would refer to what I call junior school, because we get that immediately, and it's just a cliche, but it's a really tasty one. Lama Zopa very respectfully calls it the teachings and practices suitable to the disciple of the least capability. Now, you wouldn't say that, what class are you in? Oh, I'm in the class that's suitable to the disciples of the least capability. People will laugh at you. That's junior school. Then middle scope, as we call them, the teachings of the middle scope, the teachings and the practices suitable to the disciple of the middle capability, that's high school. That's the wisdom wing. That's what you do to put yourself together. So, why is this job so difficult? Why is this job to get rid of the rubbish in the mind and to grow the goodness? Well, first of all, I suppose the first question should be, because this is not how we think of the world. We don't think, okay, this is the method for getting happy, by the way. Another simple way of putting this is the method to get happy. Buddha says the method to get happy is give up delusions, and the method to get happy is to grow the virtues. But that's not what we think in our culture. We think to get happy, you got to have a boyfriend or a cake or a happy feeling, a nice taste or a good sound or something. Not for the Buddha. They're secondary. So why is this job so difficult? Just to get happy and stop suffering? Because that's what the job is. In the end, you've achieved what the Buddha would say is the ultimate state of your own potential of perfect bliss and clarity and wisdom and compassion. Because that's your natural state. That's who we really are. We're not it yet, but that's our potential. That's what it means we all possess Buddha nature, which is very encouraging to hear, especially when you're feeling completely suicidal and depressed and you can't see past your own nose. So why is this job so difficult? Because we are addicted to not doing it. We're addicted to all the opposite. So one simple way of presenting this job Buddha says the way to get happy is to give up delusions, give up attachment, give up anger, give up ego grasping, give up jealousy, give up depression, give up low self-esteem. I mean, the word's absurdly simple. But it's a surprise to us because we never thought that attachment and anger and low self-esteem are the cause of my suffering. We think they are my suffering, and we think they're the consequence of things that have happened to us. This is something that's so powerful. The thoughts, even if we've been practicing Buddhism for 30 years, it is still incredibly difficult to do it because we are addicted to not doing it. We're addicted not just to not doing it, but we're addicted to the opposite job. So since we were born, we know perfectly well. I mean, in my case, my mother didn't have to teach me to be angry. I knew it. I had it down. So we tend to think, oh, well, that's just the way Robina is, you know. She's angry because her father was angry or something. But I mean, it's instinctive virtually. And so what Buddha's telling us, and this is the karmic one, which is very unusual in the West. This is not a view of Christianity. It's not a view of Islam. It is a view of Hinduism, but they still posit a God, a creator. But it's not a view of materialism, absolutely not. But there's a similarity to materialism. You know, if a philosophical materialism, if I want to know what my problems are, I have to look back into the past, don't I? I go to my therapist and we look for a needle in a haystack and we go back to mummy and daddy and my genes and my DNA and then their behavior, and then we check out where did this come from. We check back mummy's mummy and we go back to mummy's daddy's and daddy's mummy and daddy's grandmummy, and then we track back and go back to the monkeys. That's the evolutionary process that we follow with the Western materialist world, isn't it? So Buddha's exactly the same. He looks back into the past as well, but not your mummy's and daddy's past. This is the wackiest idea he's ever heard. No, he says go back into your own past. And that's where the Buddha's got this unique approach. And it's called the law of karma. Did we talk about it last week, Miffy? I forget.
Yeah, we did. We got just into the beginning of karma and thought transformation. But I was wondering about, you know, just looking at the state of the world, yes. How is that our karma?
Yeah, well, so we're going to go into this one now. This is like, if you want to get, you know, once entry-level junior school, grade 1 in Buddhist practice, the mind is the point. The end result of Buddhahood is your mind transformed. But from the beginning level of practice, he's not even concerned about the mind yet. He gets us to control the servants of our mind. And what are they? Our body and our speech. Our body and our speech. Now, why should we do that? I might have mentioned this last week, but it's a crucial point, and I say it all the time. And for us materialists, us Westerners, us Christians and Muslims, or whatever Western, doesn't matter. But especially we've either got materialist view, or we have got the view of Christianity or Islam, which is the creator. There's a really crucial point that's fundamentally different in Buddhism that we have to drill it into our brain, because once we get this point, we really can learn to understand karma properly. We can really learn to apply it in our daily life, and it'll be something really profound and not something scary. So our view of morality right now, our view of ethics, think about it, is it's doing what someone else said you're supposed to do. We have some vague notion, oh, it's good to be a nice person, but we don't really think beyond that. But generally, you know, if you're in my mother's household and she says don't do that, well, the first thing I'll say, being a smarty pants, is why not? And we know her answer. Because I say so. And that's pretty powerful. So look at the world. You obey the traffic. You might have a sense of being respectful to other people on the road, but mainly you obey the traffic rules because you don't want to get arrested. You don't want to get fined, you know. I mean, in Australia, I can't believe it. I got so many fines. Just, you know, cameras are blinking at you everywhere. I could not, I mean, even though I just sped automatically, I gave up driving because I got so many speeding fines. So, you know, you don't speed because you don't want to get fined. You're a good girl because you don't want to get punished. So we have in our mind, in our brain, drilled into us, and this is a misconception for the Buddha, we have the view of punishment and reward. It's very primordial. This is this dualistic view, and don't blame your Catholic mummy or your Jewish mummy for this. This is a function of ego grasping, Buddha says. This is one of the deepest consequences of this root delusion in our mind that's the source of all our misery, you know, is we have that dualistic view. Now, I'm not being rude when I say it, but that is the view of having a creator, isn't it? And I'm not criticizing, actually. I mean, this is what I always quote this, and I'm sure I told you last week, and I say it every time. I asked my Jesuit priest friend, what, by definition, I wanted to know, I said, what is a sin by definition? What is a negative action, as Buddhism might refer to it? He said, by definition, a sin is doing what God said not to do. And why is that? Because God's the boss. We know that. Mummy's the boss. We know that. The police are the boss. The government's the boss. Someone out there's the boss. So, so God is the boss. God, if there is a being who creates a universe, and Buddha would disagree with that, he's not being rude. He would disagree. We don't need creating, he says. We do fine creating our own mess. Our mind goes back and back, and we're going to go into this. But, that we have that view. And if you have complete faith in God, God knows. God has got a plan. God knows what's going on because he made the place. He made me. He made the rules. So it is logical that you must do what God said. And that's what brings you close to God. And that's what happens if you die. You do God's will. You go to heaven and you're oneness with God. I'm not complaining about that concept. It sounds pretty nice. And if you don't, you separate yourself from God and then you suffer. So that's the view. We call that punishment and reward. So by definition, this Jesuit priest said, a sin is doing what God said not to do, going against God's will. This is powerful. Now, because we know that, and we have it in our bones, this punishment reward mentality, we have that in our mind already. So then naturally when we hear Buddhism say, just like Jesus, a little list of 10 things. Jesus got a list of 10 things as well. Bit different. One of them is don't kill. Well, Jesus says that too. And then so naturally we think that Buddha's reason is the same as Jesus because God said. No. Buddha doesn't talk like that. Buddha's more like, and this is, so the crucial point about karma for Buddha, first of all, it's this, talk about worldview, a view that explains everything. This is a huge view. It's vast in the literature. It's coming from these Indians well before the Buddha. They observed it in the subtlety of their own mind in concentration meditation. This natural law, it's a natural law. There's no equivalent in Buddhism in terms of the world, the universe, called Buddha's law. There are Buddha's rules, yeah, within a household, if you're living together as monks and nuns, he's got a list of vows. Don't do this and don't do that, like Mummy has. But in terms of the universe and how it functions, there's no view like that in Buddhism. There's no such thing as a creator. He's not being rude if you have faith in a creator, His view is we don't need creating because our consciousness goes back and back and back and back and back. And we create our own stuff. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has referred to the law of karma like self-creation. So what is it? To really be a Buddhist, many people who are Buddhists in the world have no interest in karma. Don't talk about it, don't know about it. I remember a Zen monk one way, I'm not criticizing, it's just how it is. One Zen monk I met years ago, and I asked him about he had no idea, they don't think about it. And that's okay, people can take 1% of Buddhism and practice it, but we're talking the big picture here. So, the law of karma is fundamental to understanding the entire Buddhist worldview. It's the fundamental, and it's completely based on understanding what the mind is, because it's the mind that runs within the law of karma. The law of karma, this natural law, runs the universe, in the same way that the law of botany runs gardens. Gardens exist within the law of botany. So, minds and lives of all sentient beings run within this natural law. No, Buddha is not a creator. He did not make it up. He is not speculating. It is not coming from revelation. It is not made up. He didn't have a vision of it. He didn't have a dream of it. There's no concept like that in Buddhism. Sure, there are advanced teachings when Buddha at a more subtle level can teach people in their subtle meditation. That's another discussion. But there's no law, there's nothing like that. And that's why I always quote that one time in New Zealand, years ago in Nelson, one scientist, in fact he was a scientist, asked me the question, who revealed the teachings to the Buddha? And he was shocked and people all laughed when I said, don't be ridiculous. Would you ask Einstein who revealed the teachings about relativity to him? Of course you would not, because we know immediately we hear that fancy word, that Greek word. All our fancy words are always in Greek, aren't they? We don't think about the Indians, do we? We love to go back to the Greeks, don't we? So science, it means you're using your noggin. You're looking at what's real. You're not just believing in nonsense. Well, Buddha agrees. That's his method. It just happens to be he asserts subtler levels of consciousness that can see things that are more subtle, like the past and the future. And that's where Buddha's view is coming from. So, this teaching of karma is this natural law that minds and lives of all beings run within. And the main part of us that creates karma is the mind. The mind, consciousness, our thoughts and feelings and emotions, this super subjective, experiential part of us, which depends upon a decent brain, obviously depends upon a decent body and nervous system, but is not itself a function of the brain. Absolutely clear. The brain, you could argue, a way of putting it, not without insulting neuroscientists and all their hard work. A brain is a physical indicator of what goes on in the mind. I'd say it that way, and only the gross level anyway. So this law of karma that runs the universe, or within which we run, one way of framing all of it is in terms of happiness and suffering. And this is one way of framing the entirety of Buddhism. It's a method for how to get happy and how to stop suffering. It's a way of saying it. Another way of presenting Buddhism is a method of living in good ethics. Another way of presenting Buddhism, and this is a crucial one, is a method of how to stop being ignorant and how to get happy, how to get wisdom. We're not sure if we want wisdom, but we know we want happiness. Well, you know what, folks? The method to get happiness is to get wisdom. That's how you get happiness. That's the point that Buddha's making. So this big picture. So the Buddha's telling us that right now we are living in la la land. That's what he means by being in samsara. There's two different ways of using that word, you know. One way is being caught up in our own mind in these neuroses and delusions and misconceptions about reality, about ourselves and about happiness and suffering and whose problem it is and blah, blah. We have all these misconceptions. Quite literally, he says our mind is riddled with layers of misconceptions. And he's not being arrogant. You don't have to believe him. He's just telling us what he's observed. It's up to us to prove him to be true, you know. He's allowed to tell us what's right. Everyone's allowed to tell you what's right. They just then present their methodology, then it's over to you. So he's telling us that being in samsara, either it's referring to this, to going from life to life, which is what he says happens to this mind of ours, because the law of karma would say that this mind of ours, this non-physical capacity for cognition, is whatever, every millisecond of what we think and do and say programs us. So seeds in our mind. Nothing goes astray. We are our own creator, quite literally. Everything we think and do and say produces the person we become. Whatever we think and do and say produces the person we become. This is something really simple, but we understand it when it comes to being a mathematician. We understand it when it comes to being a scientist, a doctor, a cook. You produce the cook by getting your concepts right, learning all the theories, and then experientially putting them into practice. We get that. You produce the cook. You produce, well, the Buddha says we produce the person, the happy person, the suffering person, the crazy person. That's the fruit of our past actions. It's hardly rocket science. So we just have to posit the possibility that a mind does not come from God, a creator, no concept like that. It does not come from mummy and daddy. In fact, for the Buddha's view, consciousness, thoughts and feelings and emotions and tendencies coming from someone else is a very weird idea. The more you take on board the Buddha's view, the more it causes us to take responsibility for whatever arises in our mind, because it's the fruit of what I have done before. Just like that music, just like that cooking, just like that math. This is the point. So, our consciousness, Buddha says, it doesn't come from mummy daddy, it is not a function of the physical, it does not come from a creator, don't need that, it comes from a previous moment of itself. So there's one very practical way approach to this. One time Dalai Lama was asked, how do you prove reincarnation? He said, oh, it's not difficult at all. First you posit the possibility that consciousness is not physical, and then you have to look at the cause of something. So this law of cause and effect, which is exactly how Buddha sees the universe. If you look into, a cake, you have to, you see the cake fully made. So what is the cause of that? Well, the substantial cause of that cake is all the components in it. They call it a substantial cause. It's the stuff, the flour, the chocolate, the butter, the milk, the eggs, all the stuff mixed together. They are the cause. If you deconstructed the cake and went backwards, in time, you'd end up back with the various different components, all separate. And then what's the cause of that flour? Well, you go back to the previous moment of the flour, and you can track that. And if you keep going, and this is the Buddhist view, if you keep going, you track that flour back. That moment of flour came from this, which came from that, which came from this, which came from that, and you get back a year ago, and you keep saying, well, that and you follow the continuity of that stuff called flour, you won't suddenly find a spot where there was nothing and it popped up into view like a magic wand. That's ridiculous. And you would never get it back to a creator. You'd get back to the first moment of this universe. Big Bang. And then as His Holiness says, Big Bang, no problem, just not the first Big Bang, that's all. You'd have to keep tracking it back. In fact, the Buddha's view is the universe is made of the 4 elements, the matter is made of 4 elements, and then there are minds. And both of them are beginningless. As nutty as that sounds to us. But it's the only logical conclusion if you posit the law of cause and effect. This comes from this. Where did this come from? That. Where did that come from? This. It's the chicken and the egg, So it's a very powerful concept just to think about intellectually, because we're all convinced. If you keep looking back like a needle in a haystack, you'll find it. Ha ha, there's the first cause. We want a first cause. Well, that's a non-question for the Buddha. It's a nutty question. It's an illogical question. Because how in the name of heaven can you find a first something that didn't come from something before it? You can't. Even conceptually, this makes sense. So logically, then the Buddha would say matter, the 4 elements are beginningless. The mind is beginningless. This planet we live on is a blip in the ocean. We've had countless past lives. I mean, this is a demented idea for us. So this is the Buddha's view. So now what's the implication of this? This is the point now. What's the implication of this experientially? This is the point. Once we get this, this begins to transform us. Once we get this, we stop being a victim, we stop blaming, we stop feeling guilty, we stop feeling neurotic, we start to take responsibility, we start to own ourself. We are the product of our own hard work, rubbish work or good work, either way. So, if everything we think and do and say sows seeds in the mind that will produce future experiences, the next level of detail in the law of karma is that everything we do that's negative will produce a suffering, and everything we think we do that's positive will cause happiness. So of course we have to get Buddha's definition of what is negative, what is positive. This is very clear. We have to get his definition. Well, you know, right back at the very beginning, junior school, entry-level, grade 1, Buddha exhorts us first, please, people, at least don't kill, at least don't steal, at least don't badmouth, at least don't jump on the wrong partner. It's a half a dozen things, 7 little things of the body and speech. So then you have to ask him, Buddha, why are you suggesting I don't kill? And that's the right question. So if it's Jesus you're asking, and I'm not complaining, it's because God said, good enough. That's a powerful reason to live your life. But it's not the Buddha's, that's all. So Buddha's answer is 2 parts. Well, first he says, actions that are called negative, heavy-duty ones, extra ones, are the ones that harm others. Open your eyes and check it out. Ask people around, do you like being killed? Do you like being badmouthed? Do you like being punched in the nose? Everyone will say no, and you can deduce by the monkey's behaviour and the ant's behaviour, they don't like it either. So we can deduce that, guess what? People don't like getting harmed, and I mean, duh, you know. Well, that's called a negative action. That's a heavy-duty negative action. But you know what? That means that they're suffering, but that is not his first reason for exhorting us not to do it. He says, you've got to first realise, Robina baby, that everything you think and do and say, when this is the principle of the law of karma, this is the creative principle in Buddhism, this is the self-creation, that every millisecond of what I do in my mind and then my body and speech, necessarily, none of it goes astray. It's all part of the process of creating karma. Action, it means. And it sows seeds. Those actions sow seeds in my mind. And then seeds will not go astray, and they eventually will ripen in 2 ways. 1 as suffering, or 2 as happiness. Actually, there's a third category called neutral. Who cares about them? Don't worry about them for now. There are either happy experiences or suffering experiences. Now, before we go to further, check your life. Since you can remember, I guarantee if you started dividing up into categories of happiness and suffering, you'd include all your experiences. You'd have a whole bunch that you call happy, and there's a spectrum from mildly happy to the most divinely happy. And then there are those that are called suffering. Again, minor ones to the major. This is our life. Analyze it. Now look at what we want. Look at what drives us. And this is where we have to understand the mind. There's 2 different whole bodies of knowledge, the knowledge about karma and then the knowledge about the mind. You know, and they're utterly integrated because the mind creates karma. So, understanding the mind, like we talked, I think, last week about the components in our mind, the delusions, the anger, the fears, the jealousy, all rooted in ego grasping, then the love, the compassion, the kindness, the generosity that are not rooted in, you know, in delusions. These are the components of our mind. So, if we understand then karma, a negative action, which is one that will produce my suffering. It sows seeds in my mind that will ripen as my suffering. So when it comes to lots of things in our life, we get this. You go to your doctor and you're feeling sick. What's the problem? And she analyzes and she checks that you're getting diabetes. Why? Because you're eating too much sugar. So, you know, you hear that and it's a revelation to you. Thank you so much. You're so grateful to your doctor to point out what you've been doing wrong that is now causing you sickness and will cause you more sickness if you don't stop. So you don't go, oh, you mean you're going to punish me with diabetes? You mean you're telling me, why shouldn't I eat sugar? Because I say so. No, tell the doctor to go to hell. That's not the reason she's telling you. She's a wise person who knows the health, and she's observed that by eating sugar, you'll get diabetes. Well, Buddha's like that. So the real reason, the first reason he's telling us not to kill, exhorting us, suggesting, advice, it's just advice, is because guess what, Robina, precious girl, by doing an action that harms another, because that's an action you do with your body or your speech, and because it's driven by a delusion, that's why you harm others, then that will cause you for future suffering because you're sowing those seeds in your mind. And so he exhorts us first to pull out the weeds. not even pull out the weeds, to stop putting in more weeds. That's his first level of practice. At least stop sowing more weeds. At least stop planting more weeds. Stop doing actions that will ripen in the future as you're suffering. And the reason is because it'll harm you. And this is something in our culture we do not like to hear. It sounds to us so selfish. Oh, I can't think that way. Surely it's best not to, is to be a good girl because I want to help others. Yeah, when you get to university, folks, you've got to understand your own suffering. You've got to have your hands, like one of my friends said, I'm not allowed to swear, but I'll spell it out. One of my therapist Buddhist friends said, being a practitioner is having your hands in your own shit. That's what you have to learn to do, to realize that you are causing your own suffering. This is a powerful concept. And when, of course, you realize that, you can realize you're causing your own happiness, and that gives us courage. So the fundamental law of karma is everything any sentient being thinks or does or says cannot go astray. It just necessarily programs your mind, and negative actions will produce future suffering. So what is a negative action? Well, just keep it simple. At least we prevent ourselves from doing the heaviest ones, but the ones that harm others. Killing. Taking the ungiven, as the Tibetans put it, as Lama Zopa translates stealing. Jumping on the wrong partner or raping. Don't misuse your body. And what are those actions? And this is the point, what drives us to do those actions? And that's what we have to unpack. So what is it when we do an action? What action? Karma means action, actually. And the main driver of that is the mind. So when you do an action, let's say of a virtuous action of non-killing, a proactive, intentional, it has to be a proactive, intentional action that drops a seed into your mind stream, and then that will multiply and manifest as future happiness. So there's four ways that our present actions will ripen in the future. But if you look at your life now, which is the future of the past, look at your life now, and you can divide your life into four categories. The entirety of your life can be divided into these four ways, the four results of your past actions. So we've got four ways our karma ripens. One is the type of rebirth. So we've got human. It's like we won the lottery. This is the fruit of conscious, intentional non-killing. In our little bank vault, got these bank vaults with millions of seeds in them. So we've packed our bank vault with delicious, intentional, virtuous actions of conscious, intentional non-killing. This is the cause of getting a human body, of our mind running like a magnet to our present mummy's human womb when she hopped into bed with our daddy, which was the condition. They didn't create you. They're doing their thing, and we come barging in, because we've got some karmic history with those two people. And the karmic seed that caused that was triggered a few weeks before that, while you were still in a previous body, at the time you were dying. It's quite precise. In Lama Zopa Rinpoche's book that came out a few years ago, but now is again as a paperback, I hope it's in Australia soon, it's called How to Face Death Without Fear. And it's got great detail about how to help your loved ones, but particularly, of course, how to help yourself to be ready for death. Because the time of death, before you stop breathing, and that's whether it's for your cat, for your grandma, for your baby, or yourself, before you stop breathing, and in the death process, about the time before you stop breathing, is when the karmic seed in your bank vault was in past life of a virtuous karmic seed, which was triggered, that already programmed you before you even stopped breathing to go to the present mother's human womb. It had a lot to do with them, because you've got some karmic history with them. We'll discuss that. But they didn't make you. They're just the condition. They hopped into bed and had sex, which is what people do. Now they use Petri dishes and things, and your consciousness joins that egg and sperm. That's it. You caused that, honey. So there's like a miracle. The first type of, the result of a rebirth is a human one, which is the result of a good action, particularly non-killing. Why? Because killing is the heaviest. Second, the way your karma ripens, the second track of karma, the second lot of bank vault seeds that were triggered at the time you passed away, was your tendencies, your mental, your tendencies, your personality traits, your characteristics. So you've got your Mother Teresa and you've got your Hitler, haven't you? And we're somewhere in between there. So we can see clearly they both had the first kind of karma. They both got a human rebirth from one track of karma. We've got millions of karmic seeds. The second lot, clearly they're very different. Have a look at old Hitler, Mr. Hitler's maniac tendencies, and look at kind Mummy Teresa, Mother Teresa. So they've got different tendencies. Three, and the first one's called the fully ripened result. The second one is called your tendencies, or your tendencies similar to the cause. Guess what? From having done them before. So whether you're born as a Hitler person, whether you're born as a psychopath, whether you're born with a tendency to be loving or kind, whether you want a tendency to be a fisherman, whether you have a tendency to play the piano. I mean, I'm watching these days these ingenious little 5-year-olds, 3-year-olds and 6-year-olds play Bach and Chopin and Mozart. I mean, I'm captivated by them, you know. There's one little blonde Russian boy. It just blows my mind. Since he's 3, he's been playing Bach, you know. He's got a website. It's incredible. I can't believe it. You can't believe your eyes. Well, it's the same reasoning why some other little child, I remember one serial killer, American serial killer, Jeffrey Dahmer. I mean, old people like me might remember him. He was well known in America. He killed many people and ate their brains and stuck them in the fridge and God knows what. We just think he's a monster and he should go to hell. But, you know, we want to look at karma, the reason about karma. He, since a tiny boy, no one taught that little boy how to play piano. He just had to pick up a music and off he went. No one taught me how to be angry. I knew. No one taught my friend, you know, Daichen in Queensland. I always quote this, you know, Daichen, a friend of ours. When her son was like 3, she was taking the lice out of his head and he was in tears of compassion. Mummy, mummy, don't hurt them. Leave them alone. And all he wanted to do was just leave the little lice there because he had compassion. She hadn't had time to teach him that. He was 3, for God's sake. So we come with our tendencies. And he's 40-something now and he's never killed a living thing, you know. So we have our own tendencies. They're our tendencies. Mummy and Daddy might share them, but they did not give them to us. That's a crucial point that Buddha makes. So the first way our karma ripens, and that's our human body in our case. The second is the tendencies within this person, within our mind. They're our tendencies, our habits. Third is called experiences similar to the cause. Now, you check your life. Since you were born up to now, since you were conceived up to now, you have relied upon and you have relationships with beings, with your mummy and your daddy and your sisters and your uncle and your auntie and the cockroaches and the rats in your house and the mosquitoes or whoever it is, or the cane toads if you live in Queensland. You know, we've got all these sentient beings that occupy our lives. We're very social beings. And you check this. Since you can remember, if you checked all your experiences in relation to sentient beings, you could divide those sentient beings into 2 categories. Those who are kind to you and those who are mean to you. And yeah, we know they swap roles. But in the end, you can look at all the beings who have been good to you, who believe your words, who love you, who nurture you, who take care of you. And then there are those who are mean to you, who lie to you, who steal from you, who rape you, who don't like you, who don't believe your words. We know this. This is a major way of our lives. We're such social beings. All these sentient beings are not random events. This can't be. If karma's a natural law, how can it be random? No law that's reasonable, that's a valid law, is not random. It's just a question of learning it. So there's no sentient being we meet whom we haven't met before. There's no sentient being who harmed us whom we haven't harmed before. There's no sentient being who's good to us who hasn't been kind to us before, you know. This is a very weird idea for the West. It's a very weird idea for Christians. It's complete, and they're the 2 main views of the world, aren't they? You track yourself back to God or you track yourself back to Mummy and Daddy. Not for the Buddha, neither. The body, yeah, no problem. They gave us a body. They're very kind. So the 4th way our karma ripens, even more abstract, is the way the very physical world impacts upon us. Now, straight away, this gets us to what we're experiencing now, you know. So we experience karma individually, and we also experience it as groups. And why do we? Because guess what? We do things in groups, so obviously we're going to experience them in groups. The Nazis were a group. The Jews the Jews and whoever else it was in Germany who suffered at the hands of the Nazis, they were groups. People who suffer are groups. People who get good things happen are groups. You know, we're all groups. We do things in groups and we experience the result in groups. So you can have
Venerable Robina, is the COVID the result of negative actions?
I'm about to talk about Miffy. Give me a break. She's got her wonderful questions. I'm leading to it. I'm getting there as quick as I can without missing important pieces. Thank you, Miffy. She's the best questioner on the planet. She keeps me on track. I'm just about there, practically. Okay, but I like talking about the good things first because we only think about karma when it comes to the bad things. We're addicted to misery. As I always quote, I've never yet in my centuries of being a Buddhist ever had a person ask the question, Robina, why do good things happen? No one ever asked that. But let's look at the bad things. So right now, so there's 4 ways our karma ripens. 1 is the type of body. 2 is your mind. 3, your experiences at the hands of others. And 4, the way the physical world impacts upon you. So let's take, for example, one virtuous action of non-killing. as an example. The first way that would ripen, if it were triggered at the time before you die, and that programs you, in our case, we got that. Human birth is the result of one of those. So humans, you might go, well, what's good about humans? I mean, look at us, we're a bunch of peanuts. We are, but it's the best of a bad lot. At least if we're fortunate, we have access to some of our virtues and our intelligence. That's at least the one saving grace that we've got as a human, you know. So the second result of non-killing, like that little boy, like Dei-Chen's son, you'd wake up in this life with no thought to kill. I mean, it's not random. This is the fruit of his living in vows of non-killing. And I'm going to get into vows. It's so powerful. So the second result of non-killing is you don't have a tendency to kill. Many of us maybe started killing when we were little, and then we became Buddhist, or we just decided, some people, and we decided we would not kill. So those of us who are Buddhist, we've got a vow not to kill any living being, even the mosquitoes, you know, do our best. We'll discuss all this. The third result of non-killing, guess what? And we've got that one so far. That's the experiences similar to the cause. That is, you don't get killed and you don't die young. Look at us so far. We're not dead yet. Our petrol tank of non-killing in terms of its being an experience hasn't run out yet. Now, flip that over. Now, do the fourth one first, and we'll discuss COVID. So the fourth one, environmental karma, is, and this is abstract for us, it's quite hard to hear this initially, but I can explain it later. We'll go into it, just roughly how it works according to the Buddhist model of the mind and the view of the universe. So the fourth one is called environmental karma. It's the very way the physical world impacts upon us. Now, what does the physical world mean? You're living in, you're living in Brisbane, and you're in an old people's home, and suddenly some people start getting COVID-19, right? So so those people might not be your aunties or your uncles or your beloved sisters, but they're your environment. It's like, I always joke about the cane toads in Queensland. Those Americans who've never heard of cane toads, they got them into Australia at some point to I don't know, what was the reason for a cane toad? What was the obstacle in the sugar fields?
Yeah, just to kill some bugs in the sugar field.
So clever humans brought in this guy called a cane toad, and so now it's become a pest, and Queenslanders love to drive over them because they're so hideous that any animal who eats a cane toad dies an agonizing death. So they loathe cane toads. So from the point of view of, you might die young as a result of, say, the animal dies young. That's the experience similar to the cause of killing. But the fourth one is environmental karma. So in us with COVID-19, look at it. You might be having COVID. That's the fruit of your past killing, which is ripening as an experience similar to the cause of your past killing. If you don't have COVID-19, that's the result of your non-killing. But, we only tend to think there are causes of the bad things. We never tend to think there are causes of the good things. But it's got to be both. Botany refers to the flowers and the herbs, the flowers and the weeds, okay? You can't just say, how dare there be weeds in my garden? Who put them there? And then take the flowers for granted. They both are run by the law of botany. Well, happiness and suffering is the same. So, COVID-19 right now, have a look at it. It's a worldwide illness. So for many of us, it is environmental karma that just by touching another human being, you can die. I mean, that is intense. It's like eating a cane toad. That's environmental karma of killing. But if you personally get, if you also die young, that's the second one as well. The experience is similar to the cause. So the result of non-killing, you get a human body, you don't have any tendency to kill, you don't die young, you don't get sick, you don't get killed, and you don't get sick. The fourth one, environmental. But look at the world now. So it's collective karma. You can have environmental karma of killing if you, let's say, will die if you eat a peanut. All your friends are eating peanuts and they're getting healthy, but you die. So it's an individual getting the result of their past killing. But if you, like right now, COVID-19 is pervading the whole world. It's an environmental karma of millions of people. And this is the fruit of killing. And environmental karma takes the longest to ripen. It could be from 1,000 lifetimes ago. So roughly speaking, this is the explanation as far as Buddha is concerned of why bad things happen, but it's also the explanation of why good things happen. But of course we can't help but hear it when it's the bad things. The first thing we say is, oh, you mean I'm the blame? You mean I'm a bad person? It is devastating for us to hear this because we hear it in terms of punishment and reward. I mean, you know, it's just, you know, no, when you go to the doctor, you don't have devastating guilt because you didn't know that sugar would give you diabetes. Now you're so happy the doctor's telling you the solution, stop eating sugar. You don't feel guilty. You feel it's a revelation. Now you know the problem. You don't blame, you can blame the sugar company if you like. People still smoke cigarettes through their throat and a hole in their throat while they continue to sue Marlboro. You can sue Marlboro if you like, but kind of take responsibility and stop the smoking, please, you know. So karma is Buddha's explanation of the universe, and every sentient being, and humans are like a tiny percentage of all sentient beings. What about all the monkeys, the dogs, the fish? They're all mind possessors. They're all sentient beings, and they're all being run by this law. There's no one pulling the strings. There's not punishment. It's not reward, because there's no punisher and there's no rewarder. This really does take us time to hear, but this is the fundamental law in the whole of Buddhism. And then by knowing the mind, learning Buddhist psychology, you become intimately familiar with these different states. So you know, first you control the body and speech, which calms your karma down. At least you control the servants of your mind first, junior school. Don't kill, don't steal, don't lie. And why? Because you don't want the future suffering. You've got to get that. You've got to have this kind of compassion for yourself that I am sick of suffering, so I'm going to stop causing suffering. That's the approach with karma. And it really for us takes time. We hear it as guilt, we hear it as bad, we hear it as shame, we hear it as blame, we hear it as punishment, but that's we make that. Buddha's not saying that. We hear it like that. And that's the big problem, you know. So now with that little bit of introduction,
so Venerable Robina, there's a couple of questions about this collective karmic experience.
Yeah.
So one from Kate about how asking, is COVID the result of the negative actions of so many beings in our world?
That's right. Of course.
So how do we figure it out? Is it the result of our actions, even though we're not sick? Or
okay, now that's good. Thank you. So first of all, here we are. Let's say we haven't got COVID-19, but so that means we personally haven't got the third kind of karma, which is the experience similar to the cause of which, in case you die. We haven't got that one yet. But second, being sick in general is the fourth kind, is environmental karma. So we haven't got that one either. But we have got some karmic result, isn't it? Your beloveds might die. You know, your next door neighbors. You can't go to work. So even though having no money and losing your job is not a result of killing at all, but it is another consequence of this disease, isn't it? So we are all suffering in one way or another. Look at the anxiety people are having. Look at the number of people who are homeless. I mean, in America, they're going to have millions of people because they're not trying to give them any money. They're going to be millions of people homeless because they can't pay their rent, for God's sake. I mean, I know some countries are even trying to pay people's rent, or he's putting a moratorium on paying rent. I mean, so all of those are consequences, not of killing, though. The person who has COVID-19, that's the result of killing. But the consequences of it touching the whole world is your poverty. That's the fruit of, now, if you lose your job and you have poor, that's the fruit of your stealing. So try to get it this way. Whatever the experience is, label it. I'm poor, I haven't got any money. I wonder what that causes. That's lack of generosity or because of stealing. I'm losing my job. I'm being accused by somebody. You know, I can't, I mean, anything that happens, you look at the action, that's called the experience similar to the cause, and an action like that was the cause of that for you. So COVID-19 is not your problem, but it's in the environment around you. You've got to be cautious, you've got to be careful, you've got to wear masks, you can't kiss your mother, you can't sleep with your boyfriend. So all this suffering, but they're individual experiences, and each of them is a particular experience as a result of a particular action of yours. So we've got to really nut it out, you know. Every second we're experiencing something. Every second we're thinking something. Every second something is happening to us. So this is like a big garden of things. Each of them is the fruit of a particular seed. Every single tiny experience you have is the fruit of a particular seed. And those you call happy are the fruit of a virtuous seed. And those that are called suffering are the fruit of a non-virtuous one. It's kind of a pretty straightforward explanation. It's just because it's brand new to us, we can't get our head around it, you know. What other questions, Nelly?
So then, Venerable, from Maria's, a little bit more on the positive side of things. So
yes.
When we're looking at our own fortunate results, yes. How do we distinguish between it being like an echo from a previous life, like a karmic result, or just being wishful thinking, you know, just being delusional that we're just fine and everything's going along okay.
Well, Maris, no, the second one is just not being, it's like looking at a garden that's full of weeds, but because you can't be bothered and because you don't know botany, you think, oh, it's good enough. Well, you haven't analysed it enough. If you start to analyse everything, then you're going to be very precise, and you're going to look at each moment, you're going to look at each thing in that garden, you're going to start, you learn botany. Well, I mean, actually, that's a weed, and that's a flower, and that's a herb, and if I put that one there, that's going to suffocate this one. So you've got to get into the details, Marius. We don't normally do this. So with karma, it's the same. As we become more sophisticated in our practice and more precise and more logical, and we learn this law more, we'll be able to look at each moment of our experience and we'll know exactly what caused it. I mean, we've got to have that because we're the one who did it. It's not secret. It's not held in, it's not somebody up in the sky with his plan in his pocket. We have to learn this plan because we did the suffering and we did the happiness. So we're just wishful thinking, oh, everything's good enough. That's just being lazy. No, you've got to analyse what your suffering is. And Buddha's view of suffering goes to much subtler levels than we can imagine, Marius, you know. In fact, when we look at let's look at the Four Noble Truths for a moment. In a minute, we'll do that. There are 3 levels of suffering. We'll go into this, and so we'll be looking into the mind in more detail. But just stick to karma now. What other questions, Mitty?
There is a question about the nature of the mind from Wolfgang. So that if you bring, say, 1,000 parts of a motorbike together, like magic, suddenly it generates, you know, movement and is useful. So why is it not possible to bring 1 million body parts together and generate consciousness? So it's like, what would the Buddha say about Frankenstein, basically?
Oh, no, it's very easy, Wolfgang. It's really simple. We have to take the starting point, the hypothesis we have to take from the beginning with this discussion is that consciousness in its nature is not physical. So you can embody in its nature is not the mind. So body and mind are separate entities. They have an intimate, inextricable relationship, actually. Because, you know, but they're absolute, and this is a fundamental starting point, Wolfgang, for the entirety of Buddhism. So, you know, this is why, you know, artificial intelligence is the most stunning thing, but there's never in a million years can you ever create a consciousness. If we take the view that Wolfgang's consciousness is all your thoughts, feelings, emotions, unconscious, subconscious, instinct, intuition, the entire spectrum of your inner being. So posit that and then know that it is linked to Wolfgang's body. It has absolutely got body and mind. They're inextricably linked together, but they're separate entities. So if you take that view, the substantial cause of this moment of your anger, substantial cause of something is the stuff that it's made of. So the substantial cause of this plastic, whatever plastic is, don't ask me, but we know that the stuff that it's made of, and you can track that back. So the substantial cause of your consciousness in general, or your particular moment of anger or moment of intelligence, the substantial cause is the previous millisecond of that cognition, and the substantial cause of that moment of cognition is the previous moment of cognition. And you track that back, Wolfgang, to beginningless time, because you will never find a first moment, because it can't be such a one, because it's cause and effect. So the substantial cause of something is it's the stuff that it's made of, and mind is not physical. You can't see it, taste it, touch it, smell it, cut it into pieces. You cannot. It is not physical. So you can have 40 billion robots looking like humans, smelling like humans, touching like humans, feeling like humans, but that's just physical matter. Now, who knows if not one day, due to the karma we're creating, that a thing called a physical, you know, maybe a stuff that's made of whatever we make up a robot out of, maybe one day consciousnesses will die from being in Wolfgang's body, and due to past karma, because you're so attached to AI or something, then your mind might even go and join that robot's body. That's a different discussion. But you cannot make a mind. You can make a physical body because we're so clever, but you can't make a mind. This is fundamental, Wolfgang.
So in this analogy, Venerable, of the 1,000 parts of a motorbike and putting them together, yeah. I mean, one part of the analogy is you could just put them all in a box, but you don't get a motorbike. The only way you get a motorbike is actually with intention, isn't it?
So, yes. So then what's the point there?
So the point of putting all the parts together, for instance, of a body or an AI, then theoretically, would it be possible then for a mind to have the intention to inhabit it?
Well, that's what I said before. I said I'm just speculating that due to past karma and past habit and past attachment and these views that we're creating, because everything we think and do and say will produce future things. So if this conviction of our mind in terms of the physical scientific world, that by creating with artificial intelligence, you create a physical thing that replicates the behavior of a human, it isn't a human. It's just, I mean, as soon as you pull the electric plug, it's a piece of metal, isn't it? I mean, it's not a human, but I wouldn't be, maybe I'm speculating that due to strong karma and strong attachment, we might one day, let's say pretend Wolfgang's an AI guy and he's completely convinced that he can create another human. Maybe due to his attachment, his mind might run to a robot and it might even occupy it. Maybe that's a possibility. Except, of course, as we know from the Vajrayana mythi, you've got to have the subtle nervous system and the winds and the drops and all that stuff. So that's probably not possible. But minds can be everywhere. Minds can inhabit computers and wood and trees and everything. It doesn't mean that but there's a difference. It doesn't mean it become the body. So the body and the mind in the Vajrayana system, Wolfgang, when you start to study that, that'll really give the explanation of how the AI thing just doesn't work, because there are subtler levels of consciousness and very subtle levels of consciousness. And these are the fundamental building blocks of a consciousness that are inextricably linked to a subtler level of physical energy called the wind energy and the different parts. So that from that perspective, it wouldn't be possible to create that. You can't create another mind. That's why the idea of a creator for the Buddha is a very weird idea. It's not being rude to Christians. It's just very strange. A human... No, wait a minute. Also to Wolfgang, when you're really advanced, Wolfgang, when you're a bodhisattva and you've given up delusions, you've realized emptiness, you've got bodhicitta, the lowest level bodhisattva, and there are 10 stages of your development to become Buddha, you have the capability, Wolfgang, to manifest your mind as anything you like. You could manifest as a tree, as a computer, as a lamp, as a robot. You could do that, but that will be a conscious, intentional action of a bodhisattva to do that to help sentient beings. But another person outside can't make a mind. It's impossible. But that physical energy can be occupied by a mind, by a bodhisattva's mind, who's capable. They can manifest their mind in 100 different forms simultaneously, and a Buddha can do what they like. They can make universes. But this is where the big difference between the Christian view and this view. The Christian view says there's a superior being who makes me. But the Buddha would say, okay, I'll tell a nice story about the Dalai Lama. It's a lovely story, this story. The Dalai Lama is said to be the Buddha. That means he's fully, okay, what does that mean? Rid of all the rubbish and full of the goodness. That sounds pretty simple. But let me tell you more of how he would be if he's a Buddha. And this is what our potential is, okay? His mind, a Buddha's mind, once you've completely rid all the rubbish, this consciousness, which is not physical, necessarily pervades wherever there is existence. Now, I remember as a Christian, as a little girl, as a Catholic, I loved the idea of God is everywhere. I'd think and think about God is everywhere. I loved it though. I don't know what it meant. Well, this is exactly right. When we are fully developed as a Buddha, Wolfgang, when you become a Buddha, your mind, your consciousness pervades wherever there is existence. Think about this, because it's no longer encumbered by all the delusions. You've completely freed your consciousness. It pervades the universe. 1. 2, it has infinite wisdom, such that it can see the minds of every being perfectly, all their past, all their future, all their karma, and knows exactly how to benefit them. 3, has such infinite empathy with every being. It is as if your mind is linked to every being in the universe. And you have this infinite power, effortless, to manifest your mind effortlessly and simultaneously in millions of bodies throughout the universe, only to benefit sentient beings. Now, of course, this sounds like science fiction. No science fiction I've ever heard is anything remotely as outrageous as what Buddha's saying we can accomplish. Okay, that's what a Buddha is. Buddha says that's what we can accomplish. Now, there's this wonderful story about the Dalai Lama. People say, oh, he's a Buddha. I don't know. I have confidence he would be. All the best people I know, like Lama Zopa and the others, say he is, so it's good enough for me. But I can't tell you with certainty. I'm not clairvoyant yet. But he's a nice person, and one can see that. So there he is. We see this nice Tibetan gentleman. He's 80-something now, looking handsome and wonderful, running, people love him in the world. But if he's a Buddha, this is just one form of his mind. I mean, he's manifesting in millions simultaneously in all the realms of existence, doing whatever he needs to benefit sentient beings. That's how they talk. So now, there's this lovely story. Lama Zopa told this years ago about how in the early 60s, very early 60s, soon after the Tibetans came to India, all the lamas were desperate to get land so they could get monasteries so they could carry on their knowledge, because it would die out otherwise. All the lineages would die out, and that was their main concern. So at some point they were negotiating. His Holiness had his own exile government in Dharamsala, and he was negotiating with the Indian government about hundreds of thousands of acres of forest down in the south of India, which they were going to get, and which they now indeed have. So it was a very difficult time. And so His Holiness sent his particular minister down to Delhi, where the government is, to have a meeting with the appropriate Indian minister. And the first time he got down there, he just couldn't get a meeting, Indian bureaucracy being the way it is. So he gave up and went back up to Dharamsala. He took the train back up to Pathankot and took the taxi and went up there, and he got all frustrated. And His Holiness said, "Don't worry, it'll be okay, you go back right away." So he went down to Delhi again. And that particular day, the Indian minister's little boy was in the office with his daddy, and he was talking to the Tibetan, and the little boy expressed the wish for a dog. Well, the Tibetan was very happy. He wanted to grease the wheels, said, "Oh, I'll get you a dog." So he went outside, and there was a sadhu, this Indian holy man on the street. You see them all over India, with his yellow robe on, and probably his marijuana pipe in his pocket and his hair on his head, with his makeup, his ashes all over his body, and he had a little dog. So the Tibetan said, "Can I buy your dog?" So he bought the dog, and the dog came in, and he gave it to the little boy, and the little boy's so happy, he runs to his daddy, and daddy's happy, everything works beautifully, and the meeting happens, and they start the negotiating to get the land. In fact, now all the land is down there, and all the monasteries are down there now. It's like literally Tibet down in South India. The point is this, though. As Rinpoche said, the sadhu and the dog were manifestations of the Dalai Lama's mind. I know this sounds demented to us, but this is the capability of bodhisattvas and Buddhas. So the Dalai Lama's mind, he's a Buddha, he's totally omniscient. He sees exactly what's necessary, so they facilitate things. And so what can we see? When we're thick as posts, we can't see anything. We see a dog and a wacko Indian bloke. But they're both manifestations of the Dalai Lama. Now, the Dalai Lama didn't need to get born in a sadhu's mother. He can manifest as a sadhu. He can manifest as a dog. So if he can manifest as a dog and a sadhu, honey, Wolfgang, he can put his mind in a robot. But no one creates the mind. That's the point I'm making. You can't create a mind. You might create the condition for a mind. But what's interesting about the sadhu and the dog, because we think we see a dog, oh, isn't that a cute dog? But you can't see. You'd never know that was the Dalai Lama's mind. You'd never know that was a Buddha's mind pretending to be a dog. Not possible. He wouldn't, the dog wouldn't sit there kind of winking at you saying, "I'm really the Dalai Lama." He wouldn't have a little halo. He might even been a mean dog. You'd never know in a million years it was the Dalai Lama's mind manifesting as a dog, because we're not clairvoyant. Now, the interesting point about this, the Buddha can manifest as a dog, but that dog would never not be a dog. That dog would never not be the Dalai Lama. That's why the Christian teaching for the Buddhist view is very weird, that God can be perfect, God can create me, and then I can create a sin and cut myself off from God. That's not a possibility. That dog is not a dog. It would look like a dog, it would eat like a dog, it would die like a dog, but it is not a dog. It's just pretending. In fact, the Dalai Lama is not even a human. Human is a result of negative karma, of being still in samsara. There's good karma in comparison to the dog, but the Dalai Lama is pretending to be a human for our benefit. This is the point. So the actual meaning of the word Buddha is that all-knowing, all-unmanifest, all-loving, all-compassionate, all-wise consciousness that pervades the universe, and the result of the hard work of that person. But what good is that to poor human beings, or the rest of us? The reason a person is a Buddha is because it's driven by their intense compassion to help us. So that Buddha has to manifest in bodies looking like us, so we can, because a bunch of peanuts we can't recognize. So that's the same as the concept of Jesus. Jesus is God in human form. It's exactly the same concept. Just the same. But except the Buddha says there are trillions of Jesuses, which of course Christians don't think. Because bodhisattvas can manifest in millions of bodies. And of course, we don't know who anybody is. Tibetans have a lovely saying, because we're all as thick as posts. We all believe what we see due to our limited delusions. He said, there's a saying in Tibetan, we don't know who anybody is, so don't judge. So you'd see a dog, you'd never see anything but a dog, but you'd never know that wasn't the Dalai Lama. You'd never, because you're not clairvoyant, So the Buddhas are running around helping all the time, manifesting in outrageous ways. This is the Bodhisattva teachings. I mean,
Robin's asking, so then would it be a positive practice to see all of our conducive conditions as manifestations of the Buddhas or of
if you are when we get to the Vajrayana level, the first level of practice, there's no wiggle room. You just back off and be a nice person. Don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, don't jump on the wrong partner, and you eventually extrapolate and realize that it also means you better not stuff too many cakes in your mouth. Cakes don't mind, but you're trying to discipline your body and speech. Then you harness that. Now you get to the next level. Now you start to become your own therapist and start getting your hands in your own SHIT and see all your rubbish mind and start to subdue the delusions, because you realize these are the cause of your suffering, and you start to become a marvelous person. By now you're this amazing, subdued, happy, disciplined, content person. Then you go to the compassion wing and the really hard work starts, you know. And then you get to the Vajrayana, and this is over the top outrageous. And here you are completely so qualified. If you're a really qualified person, you've got emptiness, you've got renunciation, you've got bodhicitta, and now the whole universe for you is like this illusory play. You see, and this is in when you take an initiation to a practice as a Buddha, say for example Tara, as a superior, as a blissful being. This is the most absolute in positive thinking, and we might even do a meditation before we finish. You know, we'll do one on Tara or something. It's like you're identifying with your marvelous potential. They call about these practices where you visualize yourself as a Buddha. You visualize all the universe as a pure land of a Buddha. You hear all sound as mantra. You see all beings as Buddhas. Even the mean people are wrathful, like you'd see Mr. Trump, if you hate him, as a wrathful Buddha, just showing you your mind. It's a whole different, another level of practice. And yes, indeed, it's a profound level of practice. But you're not living in a fantasy land. If a maniac comes at you, you can very easily say, this is a Buddha trying to teach me, but you do your best to get out of their way. Don't be silly. Oh, well, it might be a Buddha. Please kill me. You be reasonable. But you don't know, because we don't have a view of emptiness, we don't have a view of wisdom, we don't have bodhicitta, we've got tunnel vision, you know, we see everything as our own karmic appearances. So yeah, it's an amazing view, but you've got to be qualified to see it like that and understand the reason behind it, not just live in some la-la fantasy land.
So I've got one more question, then maybe we could have a 5-minute break or something.
Definitely.
But so Wolfgang, in regard to the mind, say from a materialist point of view, you'd be saying, well, this is just a theory, but there's no proof. You know.
So Wolfgang, you've done the study, have you? You know definitively there's no proof? That's a serious question, Wolfgang. I need you to talk to me. You've researched it all. You've looked back into the Indian literature. There's all all the yogis' literature of 3,000 years ago, of the Buddha 2,000 years ago. You've read all the teachings, and you've looked into the proofs of all these beings who're showing you their experiences, and you've proved it to be wrong, have you? I see. You're cleverer than I thought, Wolfgang. He's pretty clever already.
No, not at all. In the
then why do you say there's no proof?
Wolfgang,
why do you say there's no... Wolfgang, stop. You said there is no proof. How do you know? Have you even looked at it? How do you know there's no proof, Wolfgang? Have you studied it? Have you looked at the research? Have you looked at Buddha's experiences? Have you looked at what they said? And have you studied it? Well, you can't say there's no proof until you've looked at it. And then if you look at it, you then have to see if you think it's valid. And that means the only way you're going to prove it, the only way you can prove relativity, you see, this is a really good question, Wolfgang. This is how we are in the West, I may say. You know, we say, oh, it's relativity, oh, that's science, it's been proved. I don't disagree with you, but have you proved it? You cannot say that relativity is true for you until you have proven it. Some people have proven it. So the Buddha is exactly the same. He has given all his findings, exactly every word of Buddhism is his findings about exactly what a Buddha is, and that's coming from his experience. He's not asking you to believe it, but nor is Einstein. But we make the mistake in the West, because one person's proven it, we say, oh, it's science, it's been proved. But it's not proved for anybody who hasn't proven it. It's mere faith until you have proven it. And that's the point. It's got to be experiential. So the Buddhism is exactly the same. Buddha is exactly the same as Einstein. So you've got to look into his experiential findings and look into it. First get a theoretical understanding of it and have some intellectual confidence, and then you practice it step by step. That's the only way to prove it. There's no shortcut. Of course there's proof. Of course there's proof. It's Buddha's findings right there, and the people who've practiced it and studied it and taught it since. But not to believe it's that, because we have an assumption that it can't be proved because it's stuff about past lives and stuff. That's because we've got a very limited view about what the mind is and what its capability is. Buddha's assumptions are very, very different.
So there's a couple, one from Marius and one from Gail Bell, that kind of go together. So yeah. Marius mentioned that how COVID reveals our partiality, and actually, you know, we don't really worry about the world or the rest of the people until COVID could, you know, impact us. Right. But we, you know, we're not moved by millions killed in recent wars or anything. And Gail Bell from Strati asked, did you mention that we can use our illness to benefit others, or our fear of COVID to benefit others, the others that are actually, experiencing the result? What can we do if we're not experiencing the result?
Okay, so this is where, we've got the two wings of the bird, wisdom wing and compassion wing. And so Maris's point is, first of all, a really good point. We all can see that. If you're living in a nice suburb and you've got lovely things and everything's nice and the wife is there every day, the husband's there, the kids are there, you go to school, come home, everything's consistent, no dramas happen, and then suddenly your child gets murdered. So everything changes, and suddenly you become concerned, you're full of compassion, you're full of outrage, you start a foundation just to prevent people from murdering children, but it's always been happening. Next door could have been having worse suffering, but we never even pay attention to other people's suffering until it happens to us. And all this proves is just, this is where we have to really look into the depths of attachment and aversion, the delusions. When we look into the high school level of practice, when we become our own therapists, when we realize the depth of attachment and the depth of, and this is way more subtle than we could really ever imagine, Maurice. It's really quite profound. You see, this is why even we analyze attachment and aversion and link this to karma, and why good things happen and why bad things happen. And when it really starts to show us all the assumptions we have deep in our bones. So, for example, attachment's job is this junkie in us, this frantic emotional hunger. Every second it is there. And it's at levels of subtlety that we can't even imagine yet. Its assumption, it's an assumption. And basically its assumption is that that only the good things should happen. So now, due to our past virtue, due to our incredible past virtue, due to our lots of non-killing, non-stealing, non-lying, to our generosity, to our virtue from past lives, we at the moment have a relatively good life. Living in Brisbane, living in somewhere where things are lovely. So what do? We don't think of it. Every second, we never think of it. Oh my God, I'm so fortunate. I can't believe, in other words, you look out in your veggie garden, you've got 5 acres or a hectare of vegetables, delicious, beautiful vegetables, because you imagine this, you've never heard of botany, you have no idea why those vegetables are there, you don't know why, so you totally take it for granted, and because you've got attachment, you then have this hubris of thinking, oh, aren't I lucky? You wake up every morning, I'm so fortunate having these vegetables, oh, the universe is kind to me, or you blame somebody else for it, but you never question why. It's the fruit of your unbelievable years and years of hard gardening, but you don't remember. So we take it for granted. We take the good for granted. Why? Because attachment, this junkie, is getting what it wants every second. So there's this hubris of attachment that, anyway, I deserve all these good vegetables. I don't know where they come from. I don't know. I don't care. Just give me more, please. This is the hubris of attachment, and we live in it. And it looks like we're just being a nice person, but it's so arrogant. And then what happens? Suddenly, your daughter gets murdered, you lose your job, you get COVID-19. So what happens then? Your attachment suddenly didn't get what it wanted. So now you have this panic attack of outrage and anger and fear and drama. How dare this happen to me? So what attachment is saying, I deserve the good things and I don't care what the cause is, give me more. And when the bad thing happens, aversion arises, anger arises, despair and depression arise, which are all thwarted attachment, and the shock and the horror that bad things have happened, and how dare bad things happen. I do not deserve this. This is how we suffer on the planet, and this is because of attachment and aversion. So we live in just profound ignorance, Buddha says. So the view of karma, when we start to apply that, every millisecond a good thing happens. We should be blissful, we should be joyful, and we would never forget that this is the fruit of my past hard work. You would never forget that those veggies are the fruit of your hard work. Never for 1 second. You look in your bank and you see that money in there. If you really know how hard you worked, you would never take it for granted. We never take money for granted. Okay, if you're that rich, you might, you'd be arrogant, but you don't take it for granted because you know every single dollar is the fruit of your hard work. And when you know it's the fruit of your hard work, you value it and you use it wisely. That's the attitude of karma to good things happening. And then when you know that everything's impermanent and you know you've got thousands of karmic seeds in your mind, then you're not surprised when bad things happen. And then Gail's point, when you really understand the compassion wing as well, and you realize this is the fruit of your virtuous karma when good things happen, and then when the bad things happen, because you're not surprised, you don't have a panic attack, my negative karma's ripening now, and if you really have a good attitude, you'd be glad it's happening. Now I've just finished that karma. I gave this one talk one time with a bunch of people, a Jew. It was a rabbi, a Catholic, a Lutheran, and a Buddhist. It sounds like a joke, doesn't it? It was a talk in Miami. And the topic was, why do bad things happen to good people? Well, the Catholic and the Lutheran gave their answers, and I didn't understand them, quite frankly. And then I gave my talk, which was about karma, and then the rabbi clapped. He said, oh, we have the same view. He was a Kabbalah rabbi. They have the view of reincarnation. And he was cracking jokes about Hitler. I mean, Jews don't crack jokes about Hitler, I tell you, but he was. And he said, we have the same view about reincarnation and karma. And he said, we have a nice saying. Every time something bad happens, you think, great, one less debt to repay. Okay, they still talk about the concept of God, but the same idea. So when you've really got that view, Gail, and you recognize it because you're not sick and you're not suffering, you don't just take it for granted. You don't feel guilty. You don't feel ashamed. It's due to your virtue. You nourish it. You delight in it. And then you have compassion for others. And you see what I can do to help. That's the point. That's the way you approach. But the view of the mind and the view of karma have to go together. You can't have one without the other.
So then Pauline Whiteman's asking, you know, how come Buddha can't fix everything for us? Is it because it's kind of rude to ask Buddha because suffering is our own responsibility? Like how?
Well, that's like asking me this. Let's say you're, who asked it?
Pauline.
Let's say Pauline. Okay, Pauline. Let's say you're a musician. You've learned music. You've studied. You've played it hard. You know music. So when you play the piano, you can teach me piano, can't you? You can encourage me to play the piano. But when you play the piano, I don't get any benefit until I play the piano. You can't play the piano for me. You can't force me suddenly, by your teaching me piano, you don't suddenly make me play the piano, do you? I've got to put effort into it. So in exactly the same way, you can bring a horse to water, you can't make it drink. A Buddha is not capable of changing your mind. That'd be absurd. You have to do the work. You have to do the work. So this is what helping people means. You know, you can have the knowledge of piano, you can look at people and see their potential, you can encourage them, you can love them, but in the end, they have to play the piano, baby. A Buddha is a person who gives us his own experience, who gives us the methods, he's got a powerful mind, he's clairvoyant, he can lead me in the right direction, but in the end, I've got to put my money where my mouth is. It's just so obvious. Do you understand?
Such a good example, because I just think of all the musical instruments I gave up playing just through laziness.
There you go, exactly.
There's quite a heartfelt one here from Deepa,
yes, Deepa,
asking about karma. So she works at the tax office and her job is to make decisions whether people are eligible to keep their payments or not, which causes stress to a lot of people. So is she creating negative karma even though she's just doing her job?
Well, you know, what's her name again? Who?
Deepa.
Are you there, Deepa? Where are you, Deepa? I need to talk to Deepa. Where is she?
Let me find it. Okay, ask to unmute.
Are you there, Deepa? Talk to me. It's good if I talk to you.
Yes, I'm here. Yes.
Where are you? Let me see your picture. I have to find you.
Yes, I'm here.
I know I've got to find you.
Oh, you want to see me?
But I have to find you where you are. I can't see you. Talk, and then you'll come up green. Oh, now I see you, darling. Okay, good. So listen, tell me more detail. What decisions you have to make?
Okay, so it's for the COVID payments, actually. So, you know, a lot of the government introduced these payments for businesses whose businesses obviously aren't working because of COVID. But there's really specific rules that businesses have to follow to get the payment. A lot of these businesses haven't been following these rules.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, my job is so they object to a decision. My job is to look at their circumstances, make a decision. And now we're actually bringing these people in terms of just so it's a bit more humane interaction rather than just sending them a letter.
Absolutely. Well,
so a lot of people are very distressed. You know, we get a lot of anger. We get a lot of people crying on the phone to me.
Of course you would, yeah. But I think, okay, I mean, this is a bit like if you're a doctor and you have to tell somebody they've got cancer. How can you say you're possibly, you know, you've got the knowledge, you observe due to their, I mean, if you think of it this way, due to their past actions of smoking cigarettes, they cause themselves to get cancer. So these particular businesses, as long as you're being fair, if you're being fair and the rules are fair, then and they haven't qualified, then that's their actions, not yours. So you are a catalyst for their suffering. Of course you are. You're a catalyst, but you cannot say you are a cause of their suffering. Now, from your point of view, if you are glad to tell these people they've got no money, and if you curse and swear and hate them, well, that's another discussion. You're creating negative karma by your own anger. But if you're not doing it with any intention to harm them, it's due to their actions that they don't create the cause to get the money. It's due to their past, due to their, karmically, long term, that's due to their past karma of not being generous or of stealing, that they can't get the funds they need. So you're just the catalyst for it. So it's a very good opportunity for you to keep your mind very pure and be very compassionate. Then how can you possibly say you're creating negative karma? Not possible. Do you understand?
Right. Thank you for that.
Do you understand that?
Thank you.
But it's up to you to be very clear in your mind, though, and be very moral and very ethical and do the right thing. Don't be lazy with it. Don't be bureaucratic. Be very pure, very clear. And then accept the blame, accept the abuse, and trying to be patient and humble with it,
Thank you. That's very helpful.
All right, darling. What else?
Then Helene is asking, with her individual karma has actually been really good since COVID hit, and personally things have worked out really well. Right. But how can she deal with all the persistent, ill-contented people, the news, the everything, and this kind of expectation that everybody should be suffering? Because kind of like if we're not suffering, then it's like we're rubbing other people's noses.
No. See, that's where we have to get into. Who was asking that question again? Sorry.
Helene.
So, sweetheart, good on you, darling. So that's where we've got to be very clear. And that's why if you, let's say you take the view of karma, and this is the Buddhist view, when you really know that every individual person is experiencing the particular results of their own particular actions, when we really know that, then there's no space for guilt. And because in our culture, in our world, in the materialist world, we don't really have explanations of all of this. It just seems a bit like good luck and bad luck, doesn't it? Do you understand? So then we think then people often, if they have money or don't get sick and other people, or even someone dies and they don't die, people have this devastating guilt. Why did I survive? Because they don't have an explanation for it. Do you understand my point? It's because we don't have explanations. Now, I'm not saying Buddha's right or wrong here. That's for us to find out. But we're using here the Buddha's explanations. So when you know that well and you apply that, then you would realize it's due to your past virtue that you're not sick. But don't cross your fingers, honey. Tomorrow you're going to drop dead anyway at some point, so don't get too much caught away. So you realize it's due to your virtue, and then you have compassion. Like I said to Gail, you have compassion for others, and you read the news, but you don't have to buy into it. We have to have some kind of responsibility and accountability where we decide what we want to think. I love newspapers and magazines. I'm a real junkie, but I don't buy into people's views. I don't get angry or upset. Even sometimes I'm happy to read, white supremacist views, just because I like to know how people think. So we've got to have, when you're firm in your own mind, what you think and what is true and what's not, you won't be influenced by others in a negative way. But if it's overwhelming you, then don't read the news. Don't do it. You've got to know where you're at, Do you understand, darling?
And then, Venerable, a question from Laura. So what about if we're thinking about karma and we go, okay, so I want to have more wealth, so I'm going to practice generosity.
Uh-huh.
Are we kind of perverting it a little bit that way?
No, it's up to your motivation. This is where motivation comes in. So let's look at how we create karma now. And this is a really crucial point. This is fundamental, and this gets us to the centrality of the role of the mind in everything we do. Okay. So when you create an action, let's say a good example, let's say generosity. Let's say there's a homeless person, and you know about karma, and you go past the homeless person. So let's just say it's going to be a plain, straightforward, virtuous action. If it's going to be a virtuous action, who asked the question again? Sorry, I forget the names.
Laura.
If it's going to be a virtuous action, Laura, this is the crucial point now. This is the distinction. There can be two people walking past that homeless person. Let's say I'm walking past the homeless person and you're walking past the homeless person. So if for each of us, one's going to create a negative action and one's going to create a positive action. So we're both walking past a homeless person. So in each case, for each of those actions, for it to be what they call a complete action, which is a type of action that's got four things in place, and that action will leave a seed in your mind, and that ripens as a type of rebirth. A complete action ripens as a type of rebirth. So in terms of your generosity, one, there has to be the object, a homeless person. Two, this is the crucial piece, your mind involved in the action. So there are two parts there. One is the thought, the intention. And I don't mean by good intention meaning good intention. Intention is actually the meaning of the word karma. It's mental action. The word karma means action, but the real one that does the action is the mind. So it's mental action, and that's intention. And that means volition. I will give money to that homeless person. That's bare bones thought, I will give. But what comes along with it almost immediately, and we can't tell the difference, is your motivation. So let's say a good motivation, a pure motivation, meaning virtuous, meaning you have compassion. So that is your mind involved, the intention to give based on compassion. 3, you do the action, you hand the $20. 4, the person gets the result, the $20. Speaking simply, that's a complete action. The object, the mind involved, the action, the result. Now, let's say you're a rich person and I want your money. So I'm going to be all lovey-dovey to you and all over you like a rash, and you think I love you, but I don't. I just want your money. So 1, object, you. 2, you can't find your wallet. So I say, I'll give you $20. So I have an intention to give you $20. Motivation, complete attachment. Complete attachment to be seen as a good girl and for you to love me so you'll give me your money. My motivation stinks. There's not a fraction of virtue. 3, I give you the $20. 4, you get it. It looks like a virtuous action, but look at the difference. There's exactly the same, there's an object. Exactly the same intention, I'll give you the money. Exactly the same action, I give you the money. Exactly the same result, you get the money. The one piece that's different is the motivation. And that's the key on which everything is determined. The motivation. So if you hear in general about generosity and you know you want to create virtue, you know the result will be you will get things. That is, so then for next life, for example, you know you want to be reborn as a nice human being in a nice family where you don't have to work all day and be starving, so you can have enough money so you can carry on practicing your spiritual path. Honey, that's a perfect motivation for giving money. Go for it. But if you want to, even in this life, you want to have lots of money, but you've got to have the reason why you want lots of money. If it's just attachment, that's not virtue. You poison the action and you'll get the opposite result. If you do it for impure motivation, just for attachment, that is not a virtuous karma. So you won't get the result. Believe me. So it's the motivation that counts. And this is profound. We've got to really check this, think of it every day. It's really important. So in the beginning stages of practice, there's no real, the very first stages of the Hinayana level, the wisdom wing level, there's no much wiggle room there. You just try to be a nice person. You try not to steal, not to kill, not to lie. You harness your energy. You control your body and speech. You be cautious. Then you get to high school, you work on your mind. You try to get rid of the delusions. Now you can go to the compassion wing and you can start to be proactively good and moral and virtuous and be generous and do them and practice the bodhisattva path, which is but have a pure motivation for what you do. So you want to get rich, honey, get as rich as you can, because then you can help so many people. That's a marvelous motivation. Don't hesitate. When you have a pure motivation, doesn't mean you have to live on bread and water. You can still eat nice food, but don't be brave. It's a bodhisattva view. Make millions of dollars. I mean, if the Dalai Lama had enough money, he could buy Tibet, for God's sake. If he had a couple of $1 trillion, the Chinese ran out of money, you could buy Tibet. So money is the most precious tool we could probably have on this planet. It's more powerful than anything. It's just the currency we use. So don't hesitate. Make bucket loads of it. But not for attachment reason. If you do, you'll get the opposite result. Motivation is everything.
So then, Venerable, how do we not second guess ourselves about our motivation? Because so many times in the Buddhist teachings, it says adjust your motivation, and I can try and adjust my motivation. But underneath, I'm thinking, yeah, but maybe underneath, my ignorance is just wide-adding everything.
No, it's too nihilistic. That's nihilistic and depressing and pathetic. You've got to fake it till you make it. I mean, you're only in grade 2 music. You go, I'm really going to play the piano. And part of you saying, no, I'm not really playing the piano. I'm only in grade 2. You'll never get anywhere. Give yourself a break. Of course you're still deluded. Of course you've got still attachment. I mean, that's why you offer your food first before you shove it in the mouth. You offer your food. But I mean, I'm happy to offer my food, but I'm going to bloody eat it. I mean, I remember Lama Zopa on the plane one time on a very short plane journey. And, he's famous for his 4-hour offerings before he eats the dinner, So at one time he was just a short plane journey. He was doing all his blessings and his offering and visualizing all the Buddhas and offering and offering and offering and offering and offering. And they came to take the tray. And Roger said to him, Rinpoche, you want to eat your lunch? He said, oh, no, it doesn't matter. The main purpose has been achieved. Meaning, I'm happy to offer my food, that's virtue, but I can't wait to finish the offering to put it in my mouth. That's okay. Own the fact that you've still got attachment, but you put cream on the top. You put this powerful virtue on the top of it, and you're programming your mind. So be realistic where you're at, but be accepting of that, for God's sake. You can't be perfect before you're ready. What else?
There is a question from Lola about, well, then how do we purify our negative karma?
Well, this is the 4 R's, isn't it? The 4 R's. It's a really powerful Psychological process. Lama Zopa says we are insane not to do it at the end of every day. So if we take the view of karma, which is that every millisecond of what you think and do and say, you're dropping seeds into your mind. If every millisecond you're dropping seeds into this garden, you at some point would start to realize, God in heaven, I better realize what kind of seeds I'm planting, because everyone will bring a fruit. Seeds bring fruits. It's their nature. So the first level to practice is, don't worry about purifying yet. Don't worry, when you go to the doctor, the first thing she tells you is stop eating sugar. The next step is start purifying the results of the past sugar and start, cleaning up your mess. But you've got to stop eating sugar first. So first we stop killing, stop stealing, stop lying, become a moral, disciplined person, harness your crazy body and speech, get some self-respect. Even that's a profound level of practice. But the next level is, how about putting atomic bombs under the trillions of seeds we must already have planted from countless past lives, not to mention this life, because there's no thought that ever goes astray. There's no action we've ever done that doesn't sow a seed. So we better start taking care of the seeds we've already planted, put atomic bombs under them to prevent them from ripening as suffering. This is what purification is. And this is already just junior school practice. You control your body and speech, and then eventually you live in vows. We'll talk about that because that's a stupendous practice as well. And then you purify. If you don't even get to high school yet, if you don't begin to work on your mind, already you're practicing a huge, marvelous practice. You should be very content. So, what is purification? It's, you can do it in very formal ways with bells and all your bells and whistles and stuff, and it becomes very religious and we kind of lose track of it a bit. But for me, it's so important to do it in a very experiential way. If everything we think and do and say leaves seeds in our mind, which is the law of karma, then whatever we do will bring fruits. So whatever we do that's negative will ripen as suffering, and whatever we do as positive will ripen as happiness. I mean, as Ama Yeshe says, we create negativity with our mind, so we purify it by creating positivity with our mind. You apply the antidotes. It's very powerful. It's very natural. It's psychological. Don't think of it as religion. So the 4 R's is a really nice way to remember it. My friend Venerable Gloria in Adelaide, I think she said that. And maybe everybody uses that, I don't know. The 4 R's is very practical. So the first one, and this is really important to understand, it's called regret. We have many misconceptions about this. So His Holiness, I always quote this, His Holiness one time years ago, he was asked by some fellow, what's the difference between guilt and regret? So guilt we know about, we have it, we are past masters at guilt. And that's because of this dualistic view of punishment and reward, and especially because of our attachment to be seen as a good girl, We've got that very primordially in our minds. So guilt, as His Holiness said, you look in the past and you go, I did that, and I did this, and I did that, and then you conclude, and I'm a bad person. This we run to automatically, and that's because of ego grasping. That's because of the delusions. We automatically, that's called blaming yourself. That's called anger. And look at what anger is. If you're mean to me, I'll say, you did this, and you did that, and you did this, and you're a bad person. So anger is towards another person. Guilt is anger towards yourself. It's exactly the same. So, of course, we've got to look into why we over-exaggerate our badness. And this is the irony of ego is we do that. We love to hate ourselves. We love to blame ourselves, I am a bad person, we think. This is the tragedy of this misconception. So, in other words, we paint the whole of ourselves with that one brush of that one action. It's just inappropriate. The key function of all delusions is that they exaggerate. They exaggerate. This is the tragedy. So then His Holiness said, well, what's regret? Well, the first part is the same. You look back in the past. Well, I did do that. I did kick the dog. I did cheat on my boyfriend. I did kill that baby. I did whatever I did. You own it. And this is a difficult one because we're shouting and yelling and we don't want to own it. Because you know what? Normally we have guilt, blame, or denial. That's why the Lamas always say, imagine if you'd just eaten poison. Can you imagine how idiotic you'd be if the first response was, who put poison in my dinner? And meanwhile you're determined to sue them like the people smoking through their throat and then blaming and sowing Marlboro, Determined. It's not, because you're blaming everybody. Meanwhile you keep eating poison. What a demented thing. The other one is, I'm a bad person, I ate poison, and you just beat yourself up. It's a totally useless state of mind. There's no action there. And the third one is, Robina, there's poison in your lunch. There is not. That's called denial. We are demented. Well, this is a practical, intelligent one, recognizing that everything you think and do and say will bring results to you, knowing you don't want suffering. Then you might, oh my God, what an idiot. I can't believe I killed. I can't believe I lied. What a fool. I don't believe it. Why? Because I regret that. Why? Because I don't want suffering. It's self-respect. But we've got to cultivate it. Because often what we think regret is guilt, and we don't spell it out. Or the other one is, we think regret, oh, it means I shouldn't have done it. But think of that. It's a totally useless state of mind. That's when your mother said, you shouldn't have done that. It's called anger. It's just called anger. It's meaningless. There's no benefit to, I shouldn't have done it. You did it. Now what will you do? What's the point of saying I shouldn't have done it? Where's the action there? There isn't any. But I did do it. I did eat sugar. God, what do I do about it? That's the next step. Whom can I turn to? Whom can I rely upon? I did kill, steal, lie. And then you regret. And you've got to spell the words out. I regret this because I don't want suffering. You get used to the idea of karma that way. And then you can think, of course, all the things you've ever done since beginning of time. You know, if you have the view of karma nicely, anything in countless lives. Because all those seeds are in your mind waiting to ripen. You want to get out of them. You want to read them. You want to put atomic bombs under them. So then you think, well, whom can I turn to? That's the next logical next step. Whom can I turn to? Where's my doctor? Well, that's the Buddha for us. And this is the difference between the Christian view, relationship with God, and a Buddhist relationship with Buddha. It's completely different. So it's logical if I'm a Christian. I would regret first. That's like confessing. But the next step is I would rely upon God, and this is the point. I then would beg God to forgive me, because forgiveness is what purifies. Not for the Buddha. He's a nice guy. He would forgive you, but it's not the issue. That for the Buddha is like going to your doctor and begging her to forgive you because you ate sugar and to please purify my cancer by her forgiveness. That's meaningless in Buddhism. It is not the point. You have to do the work. So you rely upon the doctor. You listen to her intelligent advice and you put it into practice. That's reliance. That's what refuge means, you know. So the second step, reliance, it's got two parts. The first one is this one. So, you know, you visualize, we did that practice. You'd visualize Buddha above your head. In a particular practice, all the lamas and all the Tibetan traditions really admire. You know, in Tantra, the Vajrayana, the Bodhisattva aspect of the Buddha is not the same as the Buddha as a monk. There's another whole discussion. In the Bodhisattva aspect, looking gorgeous, is another whole thing. And they're all manifestations of the same Buddha mind, though. There's no difference. There's different sort of showing different aspects. And this particular aspect of the Buddha is related in particular to the understanding of wisdom, of emptiness. Because emptiness, when you realize emptiness, that's the real purification. That's when you cut the root. Maybe we'll discuss that before we finish. So,
Venerable, can I just jump? I'll just jump in when you're talking about regret. So, a lady Alison has just put in that given that she's had 4 children and killed so many lice, I think your story about the lice really resonated. Is there a recommendation how to purify so many deaths? Because she's never thought about it, and now she's actually full of regret.
That's what we're discussing now, right now. Who was it again? I forget the name every time.
A lady called Alison Lulam.
Okay, Alison, we're discussing it right now, so we'll go through the 4 steps, darling. Because if we think about it, Alison, it's a good point. We haven't thought about it. In our culture, we don't think about it. We all know we mightn't kill a human, but we don't consider, I mean, both it's the materialist view and with respect to our Christian teachings. I mean, I love my Catholic upbringing, but I was taught that God made other creatures for our benefit. They don't have souls. So that's why in our Western culture, going back to the Christian time, and then equally now the materialist view, in both cases, there's no value in other creatures, which is why we eat them for dinner. We don't think it's bad to kill them. We think it's good to kill the lice and the rats. So that's our culture. So it's very not surprising we never think about it. So the Buddhist view is really quite different. So it's quite a shock for us. So remember the bigger picture. But let me finish the 4 opponent powers, and then we'll talk about the killing one, because this is very common for all of us, sweetheart. So okay, the first one is you acknowledge that you did it. This is the first step. I did kill all those millions of lice. But not to mention that, you know, I mean, it's like since beginning of this time, if you have the view of karma, this is another whole kettle of fish for us, of course. If you think you've had countless past lives, then the killing, the really best killers, it's not being horrible, is animals. We're clever at it as humans because we're technically brilliant. But animals live their lives out of this incredible suffering of ignorance, out of this incredible suffering of fear, of living, like especially the wild animals or creatures. They live by being killed or killing. They eat each other or get eaten. So to live in this constant paranoia, I mean, or just casually, like look at the fish. I mean, fish live in that ocean Every action they do is to try and hide themselves from being eaten alive by the next person. I mean, can you imagine living such paranoid life? I mean, the nightmare. We think it's so lovely, so romantic, this wildlife. Can you imagine the nightmare? I mean, a whale, a nice, lovely whale who we think are so gorgeous. They open their mouth for one mouthful of one breakfast in their long life. 40 million little bugs, little fish go in. They're killing. It's just their life. Animals just live by killing. Not to mention the wild animals who kill out of incredible fear and rage and the tendency to kill. I mean, you tell that mummy lion that buffalo's not happy being eaten alive for breakfast while she casually brings her babies and has hot entrails because her mind is so programmed in past killing. So being humans, the few bit we do as humans is nothing in comparison with our countless past lives of killing, Alison. So get a perspective, you know. But indeed, it's a powerful thing to do. To regret it is incredible. So the first step is you regret. You acknowledge the fact, I did. It's amazing. I never thought of it before. Look at all the lice I've killed. I mean, but forget even that, Alison. We just drive a car. I mean, some guy did some research, I remember Googling, just on a number plate. Per kilometre, per car, it's like trillions of bugs every day are smashed to smithereens. You know, we do it mindlessly. Even if we're vegans, you know, even if we're vegans, thinking we're so holy, don't be ridiculous. I'm sorry. Your body is a walking zoo. Your armpit, under your armpit's a walking zoo of living beings. And even if you're a vegan, being so holy, you know, I remember one scientist in Victoria being so annoyed about all the fundamentalist vegans and vegetarians, about how holy they are because they don't eat flesh. He said, excuse me, he talked about one wheat field where there's, you know, in the off-season of no wheat, millions and millions of cute little field mice gather there. He had photos of them. They sing love songs to each other. And what do you think they do when they have to grow the wheat for the holy vegans and vegetarians? They're not going to kill those mice kindly. They slaughter them. But because we don't eat their flesh, we don't even think about it. So we can't escape the fact that just by living in this insane planet, and this is the point the Buddha's making, just by living we are slaughtering. So this is all we can do, is be conscious of this and make as aspiration not to kill and live in a vow not to kill, which I will talk about after our break in 7 minutes. So there's different things that we can do to mitigate what we do, but it's becoming conscious of it. It's becoming conscious of it. So we do our best. So we do our best to change our mind. So the first one is we regret. We own we did do that. And you know what? I don't want that future suffering. This is compassion for yourself first, Alison. Forget the lice. Then you turn, whom can I turn to? And you have refuge in the Buddha. You visualize Buddha above your head in this particular practice we do. Then the second part of reliance, it sounds odd here, but that's where you have compassion now for all those lice, all the creatures, all the beings you've harmed in the past, all the beings you're harming even now without thinking about it. You have such compassion, I'm going to purify for their sake. Third one is you do a practice. That's the remedy. You do a visualization and the recitation of a particular mantra. There's many remedies, many antidotes. You know, if you regret killing, you try to save lives. If you regret lying, you try to tell the truth in your daily life. But this is the most potent antidote, the most potent practice that all the Lamas really praise, which is pointing out to the power of the Buddhas, which takes time for us to understand. So a visualization technique, you visualize certain things, nectar coming, and visualizing, purifying, and you say a mantra. It's said to be a super potent practice, a medicine. The fourth is the resolve to not do it again. Now this is a difficult one when it comes to killing, because we just live among beings, you know, but this makes us more conscious. It makes us more conscious. And we do our best. If you meet a living being, try not to harm it. So the point about this is the 4 steps of the 4 opponent powers. And we do this every day. So it's like putting atomic bombs under those tendencies and under the karmic seeds we have planted and weakens them. This is so powerful practice. And psychologically, it's very powerful. You end the day on a happy note, on a positive note, you know, because it's you doing the work for your benefit as well as for others. And you're making new decisions. You're digging new grooves in your mind. It's very powerful psychologically. The other thing that's very powerful about karma, this takes us time also to understand. We know, we think those lice, that they're immutable. There are lice out there, and we feel it's got nothing to do with me. How dare these lice come into my house, or to my body, or to my dog? How come those rats are eating in my kitchen? How come those cockroaches are in my house? We feel very much that they're out there from their own side, and I'm this innocent victim, and they dare come and invade my house. Well, no, it's not like that. It's a karmic appearance. Every sentient being we ever meet is because we've met them before, and whatever they do to us is what we've done to them before. So when we own the view of karma, we realize that they're my rats. Hi, rat. They think it's their house. The cockroaches think it's their food. Why shouldn't they? It's due to karma with those cockroaches. So this is the point about the four opponent powers. Each of these steps also has a very powerful function in purifying precisely each of those four ways that karma ripens. I'm sure it's all in the course notes we gave people, Miffy. All this is in the course notes, okay? I'm quite sure. Including the purification practice. I'm sure I did it. Have a look. Everybody got the course notes, right? You've got the course notes?
We'll have a look, and if anyone hasn't got the notes, then let me know, and I'll be able to get it.
All these teachings are in the course notes. Yeah, absolutely. So, good, Alison. So darlings, the four opponent powers, and the first one is very powerful, and this really takes time to think about. So there you are, let's say, and you've got all these cockroaches in your kitchen, right? So the first instinct we have is to get the hell out, make them all go away, kill a lot, get rid of them. But the thing is, if you realize it's due to karma, then it's inexorable that you're going to come together. It's inexorable. You're going to come together. You've got the history with each other. So you can't just keep killing them because more will come. So you've got to do something about it. So regret is very fascinating. So you check it out. What's this action that I'm experiencing now? This is the third kind of karma. Experiences similar to the cause. What is it? Cockroaches are eating my food. So then clearly they're stealing your food. They've invaded your house. So think of that action. Then that's an action similar to what you must have done to them. So then you regret whatever I did to do this harm to these cockroaches. I regret having done that. And why? Guess what? I don't want this suffering, because not wanting the suffering is the reason you regret. Not I wish I hadn't done it. You did do it, but I regret having done that because look at this suffering. I don't want this. Well, then don't be surprised. That purifies it. This regret purifies that result. Maybe not immediately, certainly next life. But even now, don't be surprised if you do it with great sincerity and logically. So let's say a person at work is believing that you lied. It's a nightmare. You can't believe they think you lied. You know you didn't lie. That's due to your lying to them. So when you do your regret practice, it makes it much more powerful. Instead of feeling all this self-pity and outrage, you go, I must have done that action. I regret that from the depths of my heart because I do not want this suffering. Don't be surprised they start to change because the karma changes. Everything that happens out there is the fruit of our past actions. So by changing our mind, we change the results. It's very powerful. It's very logical if you think it through. The second one, the reliance on the Buddha and on the sentient beings, this purifies environmental karma. They talk about how the very sentient beings that you harmed, the very ground that you fall down on, which harmed you, is the same ground you rely upon to stand up. So we must have harmed sentient beings in one way. The environmental result of harming sentient beings in this way is the physical world harms you. So by having compassion for sentient beings and having refuge, you purify this environmental karma. The third one, doing the main practice, the visualizing the mantras, that purifies the lower realms results, which of course is a bit abstract for us. And the fourth one is a no-brainer. If you vow not to kill again every day, you're digging that groove of not killing ever deeper in your mind, and you're purifying the habit to kill. So you purify all four aspects. This is what most powerful practice, most practical. And it's very empowering, and you become accountable. You realize everything is a result of your own past actions, and you could change it. It's very powerful.